is hereby given that the City Council of the City of Danbury will hold public hearings at which parties and interested citizens will have an opportunity to be heard in relation to the following, copies of which are on file in the Legislative Assistant's Office for public inspection. Item number 1 is a tax freeze for eligible elderly homeowners age 65 and older. Code of Ordinance Section -18-12-21-1. Item number 2 is a lease Oldbury Road mixed use project with theater and retail space. Said public hearings will be held on Monday, the 21st of June, 2010 at 7 p.m. in the Council Chambers of City Hall, 155 Deer Hill Avenue, Danbury, Connecticut 06810. That was attested by Gene Talley, Legislative Assistant. And for the council members and the public that are present here tonight, we will be holding a special common council meeting at 8 p.m. this evening to take up action on these same items. If I could please ask everyone to stand, and we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Ask Mr. St. Clair to lead us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Arconti.
Here.
Curran.
Here.
Demichi. Here. Riley.
Here.
Seabury.
Here.
Stanley. Here. Taylor.
Here.
Cola.
Here.
Negrisha.
Here.
Hallis.
Here.
Cabo.
Present.
Sadi. Visconti.
Here.
Trombetta. Knapp. Nero.
Here.
Perkins.
Present.
Giannis.
Present.
Rotello.
Here.
Teicholz. Present. Tamino.
Present.
For the record, please reflect that there are 18 members present, 3 members are absent. Mr. Sadi is attending to business this evening. Mr. Trombetta is at a family function, and Mr. Knapp is out of town on business tonight. Our public hearing tonight is for persons of interest, property owners, or residents that wishes to address the council on the 2 items that are on the agenda tonight that I just read in a special notice. At the public hearing comment section, the council does not respond to public comment. We're here to listen to you, the public. Give us your input, and then we'll take up questions that you may have. Bless you, Mr. Sandler. We'll take up questions that you may have during the special common council meeting that will be held at 8 p.m. When you come forward, I'd ask you to please use the microphone. Please state your name and spell your last name so that the clerk can record it properly in the record. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council on item number 1, which is the tax freeze for eligible elderly homeowners? Mrs. Waller?
Lynn Waller, 83 Highland Avenue, Danbury, Connecticut. I'm actually very glad you put tax freeze in. I wish you had raised the rates ever so slightly. I'm going to have to start taking out of my IRA next year, so I'm not going to qualify anymore. But one of the questions I had on the income, or I should say on the tax freeze, and thank you for putting this out. I wish we'd had it a little sooner because I had a whole bunch of questions on the old one that you were working on. This is the final, I assume. So you've answered a lot of my questions, but some of the people who have come in have been turned down because they have a negative income under the current IRS on line 21. And in both cases of the people who have called me about it, it has been from a stop loss that they were able to put down to check against their income. It did not in any case take them, they weren't anywhere near the amount of money anyway, but it took them down further, and they were both turned away because of this one sentence about the negative income of the current IRS form line 21. I also wondered, will you be increasing the income levels and they adjust each year with the cost of living? That would be one of the few, and then I did have something else to say on the next one, but I'll come back up then. Thank you.
We'll get those questions answered for you when we go into the special meeting. Is there any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 1? Is there any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 1? Mr. Anders?
I'm Frank Anders, 9 Terra Glen Road, and that's Anders. I read the information that was published about this, and I think it's well-intentioned and a good idea. Maybe not a good idea in 2009. The economy is in rough shape. You all went through a hair-raising experience with the most recent budget where money is tight. And what we're talking about here is giving up revenue. We're talking about giving up revenue for people who will say, admittedly, I'm on a fixed income, I'm retired. But with the economy down right now, people aren't struggling to eat and heat their homes. They're retired because they're on fixed incomes, and the cost of living hasn't been going up that dramatically. However, as an alternative idea, there's a group of people out there right now, people who are unemployed, who have children who are struggling to pay their bills. And they might be at least an equal group worthy of your consideration, if not an alternative group. I say that because they're trying to feed their families and they're unemployed. Just a thought. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Anders. I'm sure Mr. Pinter will be able to address both that section and Mrs. Waller's questions when we get into the special session. Thank you. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to address the council on item number 1? Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 1? Sir?
Peter D. Green, GRWN, just like to call it, 84 West Booster Street, Danbury, Connecticut. Members of the City Council, I haven't read this ordinance, but I will be doing that probably tonight. I just want to say I live with elderly people, and a lot of these people have worked years ago when their pay was lower than today, and these people are struggling. Our elderly people in our community are struggling today. They're good people, as I said, I live with these people. So this ordinance, as I said, I haven't read it, but if you can give these people a tax break, I think they would be greatly appreciative of it. Also, maybe it might be a good thing in the future if we give our first responders tax breaks. I'm a son of a fireman, and I know service. He was volunteer out of Ridgeville, retired as a lieutenant. So our first responders are very important, our firemen, our policemen. Also, maybe it might be time to give our school teachers a tax break, and people that work in the hospital. According to this ordinance, you're talking about a primary residence, which is great, and maybe a little tax break for their car that they use getting back and forth to work. So again, I think this is a good start. So hopefully folks will think about this hard, give our seniors a tax break, maybe in the future, transfer this over to our first responders, firefighters, police, our teachers, and people that work in the hospitals. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to address the council on item number 1? Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 1? Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 1? Seeing none, we will move to item number 2. Lease Old Bridgebury Road mixed-use project with theater and retail space. Is there any member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 2? Mrs. Tabershak?
Tabersack, Taborsak. I live at 110 Haystown Road in Danbury. I don't think the proposal before you actually represents the best use of the property on Old Ridgeberry Road, and I don't think that it will provide lasting benefit to Danbury residents. It is open space. There's only a finite amount of that, and it looks like Danbury is engaged in some kind of shell game where we authorize bonds to purchase open space on the one hand and then turn around and lease it to a private developer. This particular proposal calls for a 400-seat theater and retail space. Isn't that what the Downtown Renaissance Task Force is looking to do with the Palace Theater as a centerpiece to revitalizing our downtown? Isn't our city center ideal also for expanded retail? Do we want them to fail in both of these efforts? I don't think so. City center has sidewalks, it's walkable, it's served by public transportation. It represents a smart growth model that cities like Danbury should be using to grow their urban centers. We don't need more sprawl. We need fewer vehicle trips and we need less traffic congestion. I think all of you also realize that Danbury school enrollment is projected to increase by about 15% in the next 10 years, or by an additional 1,500 students. We can put 300 of those kids in the 12 classrooms that are now being used by Head Start when Head Start moves into the Immaculate Lutheran School. But where are we going to put the other 1,200 kids? This 13 acres could be the future site of a new school, saving Danbury taxpayers the cost of purchasing land. I think also that most of the council members are aware that in 2008, funding for the construction of a visual and performing arts center on the west side campus of WestCon was approved. Now this certainly will greatly expand cultural and educational opportunities to Danbury residents as a result, and it will be through a public investment. Don't approve this lease. It's a bad deal for Danbury all around.
Thank you, Mrs. Tabersack. Is there any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 2? Mrs. Wilder.
I just read the lease. I had a lot of questions from the old one that I was looking at. And one of the major things that I have a problem with is the 99 years and 150-year option. I personally think that is far too much to tie up the hands of the council for 149 years. I think that if you had done 3 50-year leases, that might be better. That would still allow them to know they were going to be there for a long period of time. But I really am upset about the 149 years. I understand the council will still have hands-on and can make some decisions about what's going on with the property. I understand that we need the $2.5 million to try to help with our budgets. I couldn't find the rents that they're going to be charging for these things, and one of my questions was, how are they going to go up? Are you all going to get to approve every business that comes in? Is it going to tie you all up as businesses are empty, or the theater becomes empty and who gets to go in? Because if they're leasing the land, then the city is really the landlord. I didn't see anywhere where the amount they were going to be paying for the year. I see that they're going to pay 10 years up front, which is the $2.5 million. But I didn't see, and then it goes up 2% further, but who collects the rents from all the individual people that come in to rent the spaces from the retail spaces and that sort of thing? I really am upset about the length of time that this is going to take. I really think 149 years is far too much to tie the city up to. So that's my main complaint about it. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Wall. Thank you. Is there any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 2? Sir? Ken Ducker, 89 Padenham Road, Danbury, Connecticut. I didn't prepare anything. I'm just going to go off the top of my head, so hopefully it doesn't sound too messed up. Open space is a big issue with me. If you notice, or if you remember, a couple of years ago, I stood against the Rockwell sale, where we're going to take Rockwell Lane, we're going to sell it for $10,000 an acre. City-owned property, and through the wisdom of the council, that didn't happen. Looking at this lease agreement, I too have a problem with the time length, but really what makes me nervous in the lease is the option to buy at fair market rate at any given time. Who sets those rates and where do we go? Are we going to wind up where we have land that, for example, like Rockwood, where it's going for $10,000 an acre, we know a normal building lot would go for tenfold of that. Would we have that situation happening back in Danbury on this lot? Second, growing up in the area and having my father working on Main Street since the mid-'60s, we all remember the demise of Danbury in downtown. Everything shifted out to Federal Road. All the car dealerships went out to Federal Road, all the businesses went out to the mall and to other places, and downtown Danbury dried up. Now we're proposing to put retail, and we're proposing to put a theater basically at exit 2. I don't understand how this would bring any revenue really into the city. Most people are going to, if they're going to go to these places, are going to get off the highway, go to this spot, and go back. Yes, we'll get our revenue for leasing the property, but nothing really comes back to further help the core of Danbury to where other businesses could thrive or other things in the area could thrive. Most people, as we know, we just go where we want to go and we go back. Third, what happens if these businesses don't pan out? Let's say we bulldoze down these 13 acres, we put up these buildings, and then the businesses go under, they go bust. Where does it go from there? Are we looking at what was undeveloped land, and now we have empty retail space, and we have a theater, and we have other things that we can't deal with? I mean, the reserve has a history. Look what happened with the developer up there at one point. They were going gung-ho, 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 and then it just kind of dried up and stopped. And you've got debris, and you've got other things sitting up there. So are we going to have that as well? A number of years ago, the mayor pushed for the open space bond. Like I said, I was all for open space. I'm still all for open space. But it seems like we pick and choose where we're going to preserve and where we're not going to preserve. And to try to sell off what we have. I mean, I understand we're in a financial short term, but sometimes selling to help now hurts us in the long run. We need to be acquiring open space, so we need to preserve what we have, use what's best for the city. If we want to encourage a theater or business, let's try to get that downtown. I mean, I know it's an uphill battle. I know it's really tough, but that's really where we should focus. Out on the outskirts, it's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help the city. We'll get some revenue. So I guess to top it all off, I'm against the sale of the lease of the land. I'm against this idea that they could buy at fair market rate at any point. Who sets those numbers? What are they going to be? I get leery with some of the contracts that go on at the end. We have lease agreements in this city that really don't get followed up on. There's no enforcement. We have agreements we've made with other developers in town to where after the paperwork is signed, they kind of change the venue. And it's not really what the council agreed to, but it kind of fits because it's kind of vague. So I don't want to see that happen either. So if we can't preserve it, then make this ironclad. Make sure that they're going to stay there. Make sure we're not going to wind up with a bunch of empty buildings. Make sure we're not going to wind up with pristine land that has been destroyed because we think we're going to bring in business. And it's up in the corner of Danbury. It's not really where most people are going to benefit. I mean, I know I'm not going to drive to the other end of town up the hill and come back. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Gecker. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to address the council on item number 2? Any other member of the public wishing? Mr. Green? Mrs. Green, did you want to speak as well? Okay, you're next.
Peter D. Green, G.R. DeLeon, 8 West Worcester Street, Danbury. Number one, 99 years is a long time for this lease. And I think Mrs. Wallace spoke about that. It really is a long time. I just want to make a note of that. Years ago, I remember this property, it's 13 acres, I think, and it was put up for a vote to build a ball field over there. And it was narrowly defeated. I was for that ball field, and I was for an indoor ball field, maybe to attract actually the Little League World Series to bring it to Danbury. But it was defeated, those same 13 acres. Anyway, the proposal now by Mayor Belton is to build a state-of-the-art theater with retail space included. If you build a state-of-the-art theater, brand new, I think it's a great idea. The only problem with that is that it's going to be in direct conflict with what's going on downtown in terms of Palace Theater. DeSilva's put some time and effort into that place. I know it's an old building, but there's a conflict of interest there. And I don't think if people come to this theater, they're not going to want to go downtown. And I think that place, the Palace, is going to close because of this. But again, if you build a state-of-the-art theater that's brand new, I think it'll be good. At least it'll bring people up to exit 2. And they might come down to town, you never know. But 99 years is a long time. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Mrs. Mitchell?
My name is Margaret Mitchell, M-I-T-C-H-E-L-L. My family owns property and are taxpayers on Main Street and Park Place. Obviously, I'm biased because we do own the property on Main Street, and we've struggled for years trying to be positive, good citizens in an area that has suffered a great deal from the new mall coming in, from the mall out on the Newtown Road, everything sucked out of the inner city. I really think the core has to be strong. I wasn't going to speak tonight. I'm only in town still because this is the 380th anniversary of my family in Connecticut. They came to Connecticut, to the town of Windsor, all the lines that I descend from, in 1630 and held the first town meeting there and encouraged people to speak, and we're still trying to do that.
They were witches hat at that time, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, I have the same concerns as the people before me. 380 years because we don't marry young in our family is 14 generations. 150 years, if you get married in a more usual time frame, is a little over 7 generations. But the decision you are making will go on for 7 generations. And what may look good today may not look good tomorrow. So I have a lot of reservations about this. I haven't read it as closely as all of you have. But my shoot from the hip is what happened to the open space. Will the plan get changed partway through and the contract not be enforced? We've seen a lot of that. Are we shooting too far out? I understand that if somebody's going to build a building on land that they do not own, they want to have 100-year for their building. But buildings nowadays are torn down after 30 years. That's getting to be more and more common. So planning for 100 years the way we used to when you made this kind of suggestion in real estate may no longer be something one should be doing. Again, 150 years, 7 generations. The Narragansett tribe, of which I'm a member, looks 11 generations into the future. I'm sure if they'd looked 11 generations into the future, they would have never befriended the white part of my family. So this is going to have very long-range consequences, and I hope you'll look at all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to address the council on item number 2? Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item? Mr. Andrews?
Frank Andrews, 9 Terra Glen, and that's Anders. I'm hoping that what you decide will include consideration of risk mitigation. What you're talking about now is things that over years will change. What happens, for example, if someone decides to default? We're going to be a landlord. A good business model calculates a payback, a break-even point. And quite frankly, it surprises me that we would do a lease over 10 years getting the amount of money we're getting, which sounds very attractive. It certainly does. But if it's a good business model, the buyer or the lessor ought to be able to purchase the land and break even in the same amount of time. So what's happening here is we're going to basically space out the payments that we'll receive. Will there be a bonding that guarantees that those payments come to fruition and that someone, whoever this business is, doesn't, for example, fail? People leave the state and we're left not receiving the money we had with buildings that perhaps are incomplete. And we then tear down. Just a thought. Again, looking out 20, 30 years, as was just eloquently said, that building may get torn down. It may burn down. It may burn down, and the owner, whoever that ultimately is, 2 or 3 owners down the road, decides to walk away and it's not worth fixing. Are we prepared to spend multi-millions of dollars to remove the building to make it available for someone else? All things to consider. Again, the concept is risk mitigation. And be sure that when we sign a lease, if we have to go the lease route, that we're protected as a city and we don't find ourselves someplace down the road when all of us are retired, leaving someone else with having a real problem on their hands.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 2? Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 2? Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item number 2? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Yes.
Moved by Mr. Rotella and seconded by Mr. Taylor. I'll try your minds. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. We'll see everybody here at 8 o'clock for the
I'm going to ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Arcani, please lead us in the pledge.
Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Mr. Arcani, can you do the prayer, please?
Thank you, Lord, may all our decisions this evening begin with your inspiration and guidance. Lord, I know that longtime city employee and friend, Police Officer Donald Hasek, is beside you now. For Donnie was a believer and follower of Jesus Christ.
May you comfort his family through these difficult days and years to come. Let us all remember that Donnie was killed in his way to serve us all, the citizens of the city of Danbury. God bless you, Don, and his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arcani, and to echo your comments, I know that it's a special meeting, the chief's not here, but I want to congratulate the Danbury Police Department for all of the hard work they did in making that very difficult and tragic day one of meaning for the Hassick family. I want to certainly send out the city's condolences to Mrs. Hassick and let the council know that we're already in the process of ensuring that she has received the benefits that she has rightly earned. So appreciate your comments there, Mr. Arcani. Do we have the return of service? Mr. Cabo.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will make a motion that we accept the recall to service, as all members have received copies about tonight's special meeting.
Second. Motion made and seconded by Mr. Negasheth. All in favor of the acceptance of return of service, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Arconti.
Here.
Curran.
Here.
Demichi. Here. Riley.
Here.
Seabury.
Here.
Stanley. Here. Taylor.
Here.
Cola.
Here.
Negershev.
Here.
Hallis.
Here.
Cavo.
Present.
Sadi. Visconti.
Here.
Trombetta. Knapp. Nero.
Here.
Perkins.
Present.
Giannis.
Present.
Rotello.
Here.
Teicholz. Tamino.
Here.
There will be 18 present, 3 absent. Let the record reflect that Mr. Trombetta from Ward 2 is in family business tonight. We're missing Mr. Sadi, who has a previously scheduled commitment this evening. Mr. Knapp, who's out of town on business as well. Thank you, Mr. President. The first 30 minutes of each council meeting are reserved for public speaking. I ask any member of the public that wishes to address the council, please do so about an item that is specifically on the agenda. And of course, you must be a resident and or a taxpayer of the city of Danbury. With that, is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council this evening? Any member of the public? Seeing none, then I'll move that at this time we'll close public hearing. I have no announcements for this evening, except to point out that these TVs on either side of the room were not purchased by taxpayers, the city of taxpayer dollars. This is a grant that we received from the Department of Homeland Security, primarily to be used for briefings when there's an extraordinary event within Danbury, the greater Danbury area. If you've been in our emergency operations center in the basement of City Hall, you know it's very small. We can't fit a lot of press. We've had a number of events over the years, the anthrax scare up on Peyton Aram, and other events as well, where flooding and so forth, where we had the press come in and wanted a full-scale briefing, so that's why they're here, and again purchased by the courtesy of the federal government. We will try to wire them up at some point to be able to carry the mayor's budget address, and if we can find a nice program to do voting so you can actually see the vote tally up on the screen, but that's in the future. So we're currently evaluating some software that might be available. Okay, with that, Mr. President, there are 2 items on the agenda. Item 1, Madam Clerk.
Item 1, tax freeze for eligible elderly homeowners, age 65 and older, Code of Ordinance, Section 18-12.1.1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's your pleasure, Council? Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that we receive the communication and adopt the ordinance as presented by Corporation Council.
It's been seconded, made by Mr. Cabo, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Any discussions or conversations relating to the elderly tax freeze? Mr. Giannis.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a point of clarification. This evening, we received another ordinance that had some changes in it. Just for the record, we'll be approving this evening the ordinance that was in our packets that was delivered to us by mail. or will be the ordinance that was handed out this evening?
It'll be the ordinance that was delivered to you by mail. There was some discussion about what we thought were really minor changes, but we think we can, through the assessor's office, work the appropriate interpretation, and we may come back later on for some cleanup or whatever. But at this point, it's the one that you received in the mail. Any other discussion? Mr. Cobb?
Yes, Your Honor, through you to Mr. Pinter. Mr. Pinter, during the public hearing, there was some comment and some question about the income limits and the rules and regulations regarding IRS stock losses affecting the income. And I was hoping that maybe you could address that to the council and members of the public that are here regarding the enabling legislation from the state and how that, how we get that from the state statute and pass it on, bring it back here to Danbury.
Sure. Mr. Cabo, there's really two issues there in that question. One is that the state enabling legislation in the statutes, section chapter 12 of the statutes, provides authority for you to adopt an ordinance like this, and you've adopted 2 or 3 before respecting abatements, deferrals, or freezes, in this case for the elderly. The state establishes some general standards for the adoption of such ordinances, allows you to set specific parameters if you want to adopt that, and that's what you have before you tonight in the way of a freeze. That's your enabling authority. Now, the implementation of the ordinance as drafted is done by the assessor's office. And there have been a small handful of cases out of many applications that have come in where people had questions about whether, back up just a second, the way the freeze is calculated is to look, in part, is to look at people's income. You make some determinations and see where they are in the income scale, and you derive a freeze calculation based on that. Now, people, in order to prove to the assessor where they are on the income scale, have to provide an income tax statement. That income tax statement, as we all know, has particulars in it, and there are lines in it. There's rental losses, there's some deductions and some additions, things like that. All those are taken into account. In the small handful of cases where a question has come up that the assessor has had to deal with is where somebody has a property loss, a rental loss, tax loss. In the ordinance, there is some language about adjusting for that. We've clarified how those adjustments are to be made. Bottom line is those adjustments are to be worked into the calculation as opposed to a net deduction from someone's eligibility. And that has been clarified, and the assessor is making efforts to get back to any people who may have been confused about that. So that essentially responds to Mr. Cabo to that issue. And the first issue, again, is the enabling legislation authorizes us to bring this to you and for you to adopt this particular ordinance.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Pinter.
Any further discussion related to the senior tax freeze? Mr. Shiniz.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just clarification. This ordinance, if adopted, cannot be combined with any other elderly credits that are currently existing. Can you explain how that would work?
Can I take a stab at this real quick? Stay right there, just because here's how it works. If your taxes are frozen at the 09-010 level. Now, potentially at that level, you may have taken advantage of veterans, energy assistance, maybe some of those programs. You're frozen. This year, if you come in, you have to take a choice. Do I take the freeze, or do I take those other programs that are currently on the books if you didn't qualify last year? If you follow, some people every year will qualify for a new program. My recommendation to the council is at some point we go back and clean up some of these programs and kind of fold them all into the freeze. That's the best deal going for our seniors that's out there. So it's really a yes or no question. There are some people that did get an energy assistance credit last year. They're now frozen. They got it. You come in this year, meaning next year, right? For the next budget, you won't be able to take, you can't double dip on a lot of these things. I just talked to a gentleman today. He's got a choice between taking the veterans credit or the freeze. Freeze is nice, but the veteran credit drops him $700. So I said to him, take the veterans credit this year. Next year, come in and get the freeze. So, there's a lot of different ways you can work it to be able to, but generally, yes, we can't have people piling around, and next thing you know, we're writing checks back to people. That would be bad.
But that'll be, again, just a follow-up. But that will actually be calculated through the tax assessor's office. They would tell them which one they would call.
Yeah, actually, Colleen's been doing a nice job at sitting down with each of the seniors and explaining what they qualify for and what's the impact and what's the best deal going for them. So we've had over 500 people sign up for this particular program, so people are excited about it. I think it's going to be
Is that good then?
Mr. Arcani. Thank you, Ron. Are there other communities doing the same thing?
Trumbull.
And
Two in the state, us and Trumbull.
awesome. And there's a successful, I mean, they haven't found any big glitches or whatever. And is this, our ordinance here, is it basically the same as theirs?
Ours is actually,
You learn from their mistakes?
ours is better than theirs.
Okay. Well,
It is.
no, but I'm just saying we learned from whatever mistakes they could have made then.
Yeah.
Okay, good enough for me.
For Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is there a maximum amount for the freeze made in city?
Well, there's the income guideline, right? So it's $58,000 per married couple. But let's just make up a number. If you paid $10,000 last year in property tax, then you qualify. It's a pretty big burden at $58,000 married couple. You'll pay $10,000 this year. So there's no cap on the amount you pay. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other discussion? Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just have a couple of questions. I guess this can go to Colleen. So, some of these questions may be better suited for an IRS agent or even a Department of Revenue Service person, but can you give us an idea of the approximate number of applicants that would qualify for this kind of program?
Right now, as the mayor stated, we had about 524 that have come in right now. They have till August 31st, so I'm assuming maybe another 500 or 600 will probably still come in.
Okay. Follow-up question. How many have you accepted already of that 524?
Excuse me?
How many have you accepted of the 524 already? About.
I want to say probably 515.
Thank you. One more question. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but can applicants amend their last year's tax return to include these credits?
Are you talking for the tax loss?
Well, no. I'm saying that if they already filed their tax return for 2009, can they go back and amend to qualify for the freeze?
I'm not understanding your question. Do you mean amend?
Well, if they forgot to apply or didn't apply for the program, can they come back and do it?
Well, every year you can apply.
Okay.
Now you can't show up in October.
Yeah, they have until August 31st.
Fiscal year. We can't.
Okay.
We just can't come. We did mail to everybody. We sent out 3,000 or 4,000 letters.
How many?
Right, there's several thousand letters that are out there. We did a database of
Several thousand.
yeah, everybody over age 65. So we really worked hard at getting the word out.
Okay, and that was my last question, just for follow-up. The basic mode of communication to get this information out is through mail. Any information on the website?
It might have been up last week. I'd have to check. I don't know for sure if it's
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rotella.
Thanks. Through the chair to either you, Your Honor, or Corporation Counsel. Looking at this, and this seems to be based on annual qualifying income, at least this particular chart, the original one we got in the mail, and also based on the applicant filling out an IRS form 4506 to verify prior 2 years' tax returns, certifying that the information provided with respect to such applicant's total income in the home is true and accurate to the best knowledge of the applicant. That takes care of income. And what about assets? Say they've got artwork or motor vehicles or even cash in the bank, gold, things like that, and they're actually fairly well off. Can they still, but they've got low income, they're going through a period where their income is low, can they still qualify, or are we basing some of this on assets too, or is it just income?
The only play that assets have in this, if it affects the income tax return. Otherwise, the assets like that are not material, it's income-based.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on acceptance. All those in favor of adoption, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Mr. President, item 2, please. Madam Clerk, please.
Item 2, lease Old Ridgeberry Road mixed-use project with theater retail space.
What's your pleasure, Council? Mr. Cowell.
Your Honor, at this time, the council will indulge me. I'd like to make a motion to waive the reading of the ad hoc reports. Item number 2.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Seabury. Any, well, first of all, is there any objection to waiving the reading? Seeing none, then we don't need to take a vote on that. Please so ordered. Let's move to the, Mr. Cowell.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we receive the communication and the ad hoc committee reports and adopt the recommendation of the ad hoc committee as presented in their reports.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Councilman Teicholz. Discussion under the lease arrangement. Mr. O'Tell.
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. We heard this evening of residents bring up a couple of concerns. One concern I think everybody had was the length of the lease. 199 to 140 years seemed to be a little on the long side. Some of the other issues were drawing people out of downtown to an entertainment center instead of into downtown. Another one we heard about was competition with Westcott, perhaps, in the Ives Center. And I think somebody might have asked how much the property was assessed for. But I think those are all valid concerns. I, however, have a couple of different ones. One of my issues has to do with development in general on the west side. We know that the reserve has gone in several years ago. Briar Brook, is it called? What's the name of that Toll Brothers place that went in on Briar Ridge? There's some houses on Briar Ridge that have gone in the last 10 or 15 years with kids. And looking down the road, I think at some point we're probably going to need to be building a school on the west side, not in the next couple of years, but certainly in the next 10 or 15 years. We'll be needing a school at some point up there. It would be nice if we could have a school that the kids in the area could walk to. This seems like it might be a good place to build it. I've spoken to the school board and the school officials, and they are on the fence about this. They seem to be looking in the immediate future about expanding schools on the east side. This does not seem to be on their radar, but it's certainly a concern that I have. One of the other concerns is just in general when it comes to leasing property as opposed to disposing it by sale. We still own it, and there's certainly good things to be said about that. One of them, obviously, is that you can keep essentially selling it by lease indefinitely, forever. We don't sell it once and collect our money and that's it, but we can every 10 years do this. And indeed, the way the lease is structured, we're looking at probably getting maybe 50% of the value of the land every 10 years for 100 years or 150 years. It's essentially a windfall for the city. But the other side of that coin is that we maintain ownership, and if something were to happen to the property, we might, in certain circumstances, be responsible for that. And one thing comes to mind is an environmental issue. For instance, 150 years, it's a long time for oil tanks to leak and whatnot. If something were to happen and the present leaseholder went bankrupt, there was an oil leak, for instance, and some severe environmental damage like we had at Broadview, perhaps leaking in the Ridgefield water supply system, which is essentially close by, we would basically be responsible for the remediation. I would like to see it's not an insurmountable issue. I'd like to see perhaps a remediation bond included in the lease. I don't think that's in there at this point, but those are just some of the concerns that I have with the structure of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Tell. Further discussion. Let the record reflect Mr. Sadi has entered about 8:35. Okay, Devin.
Yes, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Your Honor. Through the Chair, Director of Finance, please.
So say Hilaire, please.
Thank you. The $2.5 million that would most likely, if this was approved, that $2.5 million would be paid up front. And a little bit less follow-up on that. Has that $2.5 million been put into the budget as of 2/10/11, meaning that is it a part of the budget as it stands July 1st?
Actually, it's in the 09-10 budget.
So therefore, what you're saying is that, all due respect again, I don't mean to put you on a bad situation at all, but it seems to me that if by chance this esteemed council would say negative to this, how serious of a problem would that cause regarding the $2.5 million that has already been put into the budget, therefore would, in essence, not be there? How much problem do we have?
Councilman, it's a problem. It's not insurmountable, but we'd rather have the revenue than not have the revenue. Let's put it that way. It's been a rough year. A lot of at the end of the season, we had a lot of late expenses, Broadview oil leak, other things that this would help out a lot.
So I appreciate the comments, but at the same token, one must understand that it puts this council in somewhat of a situation, because we know that, and again, I certainly understand the situation with the budget, and I appreciate all that you've done, but it certainly puts us in a situation where if we were to deny, it really would hurt in terms of overall. But yet, at the same token, it's sort of convoluting to me that you can't, you're twixt in between. You know what I mean? You almost have to say go along with it, even though one might say, well, I'm not so sure about it, but we already figured into the budget. So it's sort of, to me, it reeks of a little bit of manipulation. I'm probably going to go for it, but I still kind of think that it's something that maybe should have been stated more precisely to us, because now I would feel guilty if I voted no. Well, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And we appreciate your comments, Councilman. You can vote no anytime you want. I don't think you should feel that way. We make assumptions about revenue every year in our budget. We make assumptions about land leases every year, whether it's Red Lobster, whether it's Olive Garden, whether it's at the airport, where we have about 8 jillion different leases in there. Sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't. Obviously, if this doesn't happen, we'd like it to happen and not to happen. I want it for the jobs and the economic development. That's the most important thing for me. More so than the revenue is nice, but the reality is if you want to go, no, no.
Your Honor, believe me, Your Honor, I respect what you're saying, but you have to understand, and I'll say it loud and clear, if I decide to vote no, there's no way in hell that anybody would change my mind, so don't respect that.
No, I just don't want you to feel guilty.
Don't worry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Was there a question in there?
Question stated.
Further discussion. Mr. Shinisi.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess my question would be to the Corporation Council.
Mr. Less.
Either one, either Bob or Leslie. As landlords, as to the land lease, what are our rights as landlords? What can we hold them to do, and what can't they do as landlords? Because we haven't seen a lease in front of us, but 99 years is a long time. Like I said, we mentioned, the next generation will have to deal with it. But as landlords, one of the reasons why we didn't sell this property, so we still have some control over this property, what they can build, what can't they build. Can you just explain as landlords what can we hold them accountable for?
I'll let Attorney Ammon speak to the particulars of this lease, but in general, we can hold them to a commitment to pay us a certain amount of money, either in the upfront development fee portion or in rent as adjusted. We can hold them to a certain kind of development as long as it's stipulated in the lease agreement. We can also hold them to take certain actions on the property that we want them to do. For example, some preliminary testing and survey work and other commitments and obligations that they need to, that we ask them to provide. Those are the kind of things that we can do. There are also some clauses in leases generally which result in reverter of property. That means that if somebody commits an act such as bankruptcy or other serious malfeasance of any kind similar to that, then there are typically clauses in there that allows the landlord to step in, as the case, as Mr. Rattel and others would know, where you have remedies where you would take back the property in case something extraordinary happens. But those are extraordinary conditions. So in general, that's the umbrella of rights that we would have.
Maybe quick thought, and what does this lease have to protect the city?
Well, it has a whole host of provisions that we required in the first draft, and then I supplemented in the red line version that you have. For example, they can transfer the lease to an assignee, but they have to prove that the assignee has a net worth of, their suggestion was $5 million, and I bumped it up to $10 million. And actually, I haven't gotten any feedback on that yet, but that's probably where we're going to end up.
So at least that we haven't finalized it.
No, we have not. No. And all the things that we haven't finalized are moving in our direction. There are requests and demands that we want inserted into the lease. In fact, their attorney was here earlier, and we had a chance to discuss some of the additional provisions that we want to insert into the lease. We can also sell or assign our interest in this lease. We can sort of arbitrage this. So as you heard earlier, if this works at all the way we envision it, it's going to be a financial windfall for the city in a whole host of ways. But there's nothing in here that limits us from actually leveraging that by selling the lease in whole or in part to a partner, for example, for a premium. And that's we asked for that, and it's in paragraph 19.9. So there's an enormous amount of flexibility built into this. Just briefly, as you know, we envisioned a whole host of uses for this property, none of which came to fruition. The last major one was the ballpark. And right now, the land is sitting there generating no taxes whatsoever. If this goes through, it'll immediately go on the tax rolls. Then when they start building, it will generate tens of thousands of dollars in permit fees. And when the project is put into service, it'll generate hundreds of jobs. So that's what we envision for the project.
Just to follow up on a point you just made, when you said they're going to start paying taxes immediately, that's on the land?
Yes. As the value of the property goes up because of the improvements, of course, the taxes will go up.
Let's just clarify that for a second. Just for the buildings on the property. Right. I mean, the land is owned by the city. So when the lease is executed, the city still is the property owner, so you're not going to collect any property taxes on the lease land, the lease alone.
Well, perhaps David could speak to that issue.
Just on that issue, this lease would work as typical leases do elsewhere. The airport is probably a prime example where the city owns the underlying fee, but the developer/lessee has a clause in the lease that provides their obligation for the tax due on the improvements to the property. And that happens commonly. The assessor would assess them on the improvements, not on the land.
I understand that, but the land itself is not taxed, right? So when you sign the lease, you're not collecting any taxes. You won't collect any taxes till you start turning a shovel and start building a building. That's an improvement to the property, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just want to clarify that.
Actually, that specific provision is built into this.
I think that Mr. Yannon has stated that.
Yeah, that's true. But the provision for the tenant to pay taxes rather than the landlord is built into this. Taxes that are due, which will be on improvements.
Couple follow-up questions.
Sure.
In the lease, it states that they can buy the property at fair market value at any time. What is the current fair market value of that lease?
Of the property?
I think the appraisal we had was 4.2.
4.2, right.
Is there anywhere in the lease where the fair market value could go below 4.2 million at any point in time?
Yes.
So
I mean, by implication, they'll pay whatever the fair market value is at the time of the exercise of the right of the option. It's really an option more than right of first refusal.
There's no base, they can go as low as...
Correct.
So you're not a cap, we can't go below $1 million.
There's no cap, but there's no floor either.
I would say that we wouldn't sell it to them if it was below $1 million. What sense would that make, right? So remember that if there's a sale, it's got to come back to you guys. You can deny it, say no, we want to hang on to it. You certainly don't have to approve it if you don't agree with the price.
That's correct. It has to go through all the normal provisions, public hearing and everything else, but there's no floor. The price would really depend on where in the timeline of the project the purchase would occur. So obviously the price would be much higher if the project was built out in whole and part.
Mr. Paul, since we don't have a signed lease yet, so this evening we're voting on approval to sell the land subject to the lease, since the lease is not agreed upon yet.
Well, not to sell the land, to lease it.
We didn't see the final lease yet. It's not finalized. We don't know what the terms are going to be.
That's correct.
Can it be subject to us approval of that lease or something?
You know, what we could do is, the general terms are described in the lease. These are some issues that, some minor things that Bob will make some corrections on. We'll distribute a copy of the final lease to everybody, assuming we have the authority to sign it tonight. So if you don't like it, you can put it back on the agenda. Try a vote on knocking it down. Mr. Curran.
Your Honor, if they have the option to buy, does that mean we have to sell it to them?
No. You don't have to sell it if you don't want to.
That language isn't finalized, so that's one of the things we're going to be discussing tomorrow.
But I'll make sure that if we don't want to sell it, we don't have to sell it. It'll be your choice. And just for the record, I gave the option to purchase it already. It would be cleaner if we just brought back an offer to purchase the property right now. And that doesn't really work in the economic model of what you're trying to do. So I don't think you're going to be doing that anytime soon, but I'll make sure the lease says that the council obviously has to come back here and wants a piece of property from the city, and that you have the authority to reject it. College. And then Nancy.
Thank you, Your Honor. What are we voting on? We're not voting on the lease because we haven't even seen the lease. We're only voting to move forward to...
You're voting to give us the authority to
produce the lease?
Essentially, negotiate and enter into a lease of the property.
Okay, and a follow-up question. It says option.
Which is actually, I mean, if you think about it, you're almost always voting to give us the authority to negotiate the details of various contracts.
So we will have a finals. We will see the final.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll distribute it to everybody.
And the information that we've given here, option to purchase at any time during the term lease based on fair market value. It says option purchase.
That was their language.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Seabury.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know to whom I direct this question. When these folks take over this, do we have a provision in that lease that will protect us against them just walking away from the thing and leaving what goes down on Main Street?
Well, we got $2.5 million of our money, so if they want to walk away, that's fine. We'll just sell it again.
But is there a protection clause in there?
Well, we try to address it in a number of different ways. For example, if it occurs early on, it'd actually be a windfall for us as the mayor.
If it occurs 10 years on, it's a windfall for us.
Well, actually, at almost any point in the process, it would be a windfall.
That's why we want the upfront payment, to ensure that we're going to have work done out there in an appropriate timely manner. Nobody's going to give you a check for $2.5 million and then say, I'm not going to build it.
By the way, if they don't build, I added language throughout the lease to make it clear that doesn't obviate their requirement to pay rent. So, and taxes and everything else, to the extent taxes are due. There's also provisions in here that require them to clean up damage. Let's say there's a fire or some other catastrophe, and even to screen it, which was language I suggested that ended up in the first draft. So that you wouldn't be able to see, we try to think of the types of things that would be of concern to you and even of the area residents. So I can't find it, but there is language in here that requires them to. By the way, just by way of background, this developer has done this in Pleasantville, and the mayor and some other folks.
In fact, I think we invited the council to visit. Nobody took us up on the offer.
I never got to it. So it's phenomenally successful, and in fact, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't invite you, even at this point, to tour that facility. But we know that they're capable of affecting this kind of a project because they've done it.
So let me just reiterate. If we take their $2.5 million, nobody's going to sit around and not build this. It's not going to happen. It's the worst business decision ever made by anybody. In fact, I'll just keep leasing it over and over again. Good deal for us. So that's the motivation to get the project done. Nancy.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. You would like us to agree to give you the authority to sign a lease, but a lease that we haven't seen yet. And when we do see it, it will already be signed.
Well, there's one of two ways. One, you can give us the authority to finish negotiations and have a agreed upon lease presented back to the council. Or you can give us the authority to negotiate based on the parameters we gave you tonight, execute the lease. If the council's not happy with it, put it back on the agenda and you can beat it right down.
But is it possible to, if you've already signed the lease, is it possible to renege on that after it's already been signed?
You guys are the legislative body of the city, you can do whatever you want.
But it's also a legal document that's already been signed.
Well, I think we can...
we'll make it subject to council.
Subject to council approval.
Right in the document. How about that?
Okay. So we'll make it subject to council approval. Go ahead, Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just procedurally, if we do make it subject to council approval, that then means what our vote is to authorize Corporation Council to go forward to negotiate, and subject to council approval would mean that it would have to come back to the council and be on the agenda in August. If we just vote to authorize the negotiations and execution of the lease, and I through the chair to our parliamentarian, wouldn't the appropriate way to basically vitiate or negate this would be through a motion to reconsider at the next meeting? That motion to reconsider can only be made by a member of the body who voted on the prevailing side. So hypothetically, In order to move to reconsider at the next meeting, you would have to be somebody who voted yes for the lease, if that's the will of the majority. Someone who voted no could not move to reconsider, correct?
That's the rule about reconsideration, that's right.
So,
Conversely, I would also say that under your rules of council, you can put any item on the agenda for discussion, regardless of the presentation.
and I understand that, and I understand the explanation that it is a legislative body, and the legislative body has to make the decision. But from a legal standpoint of what we would call promissory estoppel, basically holding out a promise and then taking it back, that from a parliamentary standpoint, the motion to reconsider would be the appropriate way, because then it actually turns the clock back to the previous meeting. It's very clear and clean that you negate that action, but you have to be on the yes side or the prevailing side to do that.
You do, that's the way that would actually work.
So that being said, what Councilwoman Deep D'Amici said, and Your Honor, I think you responded, that we could do this subject to council approval, which would mean it would be an item, the final lease would be an item on the next agenda. The only concern I would have there is if, let's say, hypothetically, we voted it down. If it was signed and wasn't done as a motion to reconsider, what is our liability? And we were chatting about that a little bit before. In doing that, let's say it comes on, we approve tonight, subject to council approval of the final lease. How would it come on the agenda? And if we did vote it down, what legal effect would that have?
Well, this is why in drafting a motion for you tonight, I was very careful in avoiding that situation. And the way that I hope we can avoid that situation is by authorizing, what you have in your packet tonight are the material terms and conditions of the proposed document, right? As you know, Councilman Sadi, that provides the necessary elements of the lease that you need. So the motion is crafted where you would, knowing the material terms, authorize our office to negotiate the final lease. In other words, it would be basically a completed document. You wouldn't have any reason to come back and reconsider the substantive terms of the lease, the material terms of the lease. So that would be your cover of protection there in that case. If you still wanted to come back and reconsider the lease, you could do that. But you would have some repercussions about that, because if it's signed already, you have parties agreeing to something. So even if you want to change a relatively minor matter, you would have to open negotiations at that time.
Dr. Williams, let's just say that one more time. Sure. Can you just say that again so that folks understand?
The last part, the whole. Okay. The motion again. The motion says, or asks the council to do this. A lot of people are wondering, how you do this. You declare the property surplus. Number one. Number two is you authorize the lease of the property by 2/3 vote of the council. 14 votes is what's required to transact this deal. And the motion would also include the approval of all material terms of the lease, which you have, and if there's any questions, we can answer the material terms, subject to final negotiation, which are all other non-material provisions of the lease, which are your standard clauses, kind of the how you doing, and the actions that would be taken in case there's a default, tax clauses, things like that. So those are the non-material clauses which you would be authorizing our office to finish off the negotiations. You having the comfort of knowing that the material terms, the term, the amount of money, the length would all be established. That's why I took some care in preparing that motion, so that would cover, and hopefully we don't have to come back to the reconsideration ever.
Thank you. That then, and I didn't intend on going in this direction, but that then begs the issue that has been coming up, and I think Councilman Deep D'Amici sort of, touched on very succinctly, was if that's what we're doing, and a couple of the councilors brought that, if that's what we're doing, then there really is not the opportunity to come back in August, potentially. Or if we do, it's an motion to reconsider, but there are still a whole host of possible legal implications if we have a signed document. I don't want to hold out a representation that then the council could, I'm just trying to see where people are on this and understand. I think this is a very good proposal. I like it. But when you parse the material versus non-material, I think Councilman Chenese and others were asking about default positions and taxes and all that. Those seem quite material to a lot of people's consideration of this. I understand the boilerplate provisions. And if this is not a bifurcated vote on authorizing going forward and then separately approving in August, I'll be voting on the yes side, because generally, in concept, I like this, but I also want to be able to, possibly, if necessary, be able to move to reconsider.
And if you try to reconsider a signed lease document, you have implications from that. You have to essentially go back in time and renegotiate those provisions of the lease that you didn't like, and it would come back to you, and there'd be a time delay. Whatever the repercussions of that is, non-receipt of the money, or a delay in rent, or a delay in whatever those implications are, you have to deal with those at that time. The idea, we've done this before in a couple of cases where you're authorized to negotiate a document, whatever it is, ICE agreement or whatever, and then we explain what's in there, and then it comes back, and you normally say, here it is, thank you very much. Generally, it's just consented or whatever. It is a possibility. If you look at it and say, this is no good, such a... Yeah, you'd have some implications with that. No question about it.
I think, if I may follow up, Your Honor, just to get a level of comfort with this, the distinction between this proposal and maybe some of the others where we authorize the negotiating and then the execution and everything is bundled together, this is a much longer term commitment on both parties. And it's a lot of money up front from the other party, so we don't want to hold anything out that we can't live up to, and I'm sure we will live up to our obligations. Like I said, I generally support this, and I'd like to know if we would be able to get a copy of the complete negotiated lease prior to the August meeting. Will we get it before the July regular meeting? So, because under our rules, it can only be reconsidered at a subsequent meeting.
July.
So it would have to be, will it be ready then through the chair? Will the complete lease be ready prior to our July meeting?
Yes is the answer I have here.
And then as a point of parliamentary inquiry, it does not have to be on the agenda. It can be moved from the floor to reconsider an item on a previous agenda, correct?
Yes.
Special meeting or regular meeting, correct?
That's right.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure of that. Thank you. That's all I have right now.
Keep going, Mr. Visconti.
Thank you, Your Honor. Through the chair to Corporation Counsel, if this were approved and they were given a go-ahead, what does it mean for that area up there? Does this open up Pandora's box that there may be more of this building going on in that area, or, for the folks that...
Let me just say that, I'll answer this real quickly. Folks, the zoning, planning is not on tonight's agenda. It's really the approval of the reason. I understand Mr. Visconti's concern. So this parcel is adjacent to the planned neighborhood development parcel. There's about a couple 100,000 square feet of commercial space that's been approved in there, along with housing and along with some small boutique retail as well. That's part of the PND zone that it abuts. This piece was carved out as a gift from the developer to the city to build a minor league baseball stadium along with $10 million. We opted not to go forward with the baseball stadium. We kept the $10 million. And here we are with this alternative development. So I don't necessarily actually see it as opening any kind of floodgates to any other development up there. Just keep in mind that some of that style of development has already been approved in the urban center of the reserve. Whether it gets built or not, a whole other discussion, but it does have approval there. And across the street was recently rezoned. The GE building was rezoned to residential. In fact, the folks that are looking at the residential piece across the street are happy about this because it provides a lifestyle center, someplace you can walk across the street, walk around, eat in the restaurants, attend a movie, whatever it might be.
Thank you. Follow up, if I may. I believe you said Pleasantville, New York. Is that where they have another?
That's correct.
I don't know if is there anyone here I could ask them a question, perhaps?
Mr. Foley, come to the microphone. Just identify yourself.
Mr. Foley's the principal, right?
That's terminology, I guess.
But just one quick question. I know we're in preliminary stages here, and we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us, but have you anybody that would be interested in so far coming to this area, coming to the project as far as retail space or anything like that?
We have had serious discussions, negotiations, in fact, with a upscale let's call it natural foods market, a whole foods type of operation, and a couple of different restaurants and a couple of other different tenants that will be interested, in addition to the Jacob Burns Home Center that's currently also.
Okay, so there are people that may be interested in coming to the area.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Visconti, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Visconti did get some of my questions answered by Mr. Foley. Through you, Your Honor, to Mr. Foley. Mr. Foley, would you be able to speak to, I think it was Pleasantville, that the other, am I correct?
Do I need to go over there?
Yes, please.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir. I think it was Pleasantville at the other...
Yes.
Okay, thank you. From the time that you were at this stage in Pleasantville to where it is now, how many years transpired?
Pleasantville was a different situation because it was an old abandoned movie theater that had become outdated, and we purchased it as a vacant property and raised money and expanded it and renovated it and reopened it as an event theater. So it wasn't a new construction out of the ground situation. It was a slightly different situation.
Some of the things that I heard from our constituents, and I'm trying to separate this into two things, is Peter Nero, the guy walking down the street that's thinking about the West Side development thing, versus the language that Councilman Sadi was speaking about regarding the lease and that kind of thing. So I'm trying to keep the two things separate in my mind so that here are the mechanics that make it a good idea or a bad idea. And here is the documentation or the behind-the-scenes stuff that we have to go through to make sure that it works to protect the citizens of Danbury. And one of the things Councilman Visconti had mentioned were some of the groups that might be going in here, and of course I don't want you to divulge anything that might harm your potential business there. But I would, and I think perhaps the mayor also serves as our economic development director. Okay. One of the questions, and Mr. Foley, this is not really directed at you, but there's a part that you might be able to play in this, but I think, perhaps the mayor can weigh in on this. One of the concerns that people brought up were how is it going to impact downtown Danbury? You put this facility on the west side. So that was one of the things that did come up. The other thing that came up was if somewhere, and this is why I wanted to understand how long it took for this project in Pleasantville to evolve. One of our other constituents brought up the fact that, well, if this isn't going the way it should be going, and I don't know how many buildings it's going to be or businesses, but if there's 8, 10, 15, I don't know, and you decide to walk away with it, and then Danbury has all of this partially developed property, or if something happens to it, what does Danbury do with it? Because we own the land, but we don't own the property. So, and the mayor's, his honor is good at sorting this thing out, so he may say this is my part, Councilman Nero, and this is Mr. Foley's part. So,
well, look, I think two things. I mean, this argument about, well, what does this do to downtown Danbury? You can't deny a project because of the impact it might have somewhere else. You can't say to Mr. Foley, we don't want you to build it on this parcel, we want you to set it up on Main Street. I mean, it's nice to say, but the economics don't drive it down there. What you have to look at this at Main Street in the urban core is differently than you look at the outskirts of the city. So as far as Main Street goes, we're working on a strategic plan that will hopefully encompass zoning, will encompass investment, will encompass development, will encompass every aspect of a vibrant urban core that we hope to have ready within the next month or two. But the argument that, well, we shouldn't have any development there because it really should be downtown, then you're not going to get anything downtown. I mean, in other words, you can't say if you don't have it there, it will go downtown. It doesn't work that way. You have to have a strategic plan in downtown that works. This city for 30, 40 years has been struggling with their strategic vision that works through administrations. Everybody owns a little bit. We're going to put a strategic plan together that you'll see in the next couple of months. It doesn't require any money, but does require buy-in as policymakers to say this is the direction and this will help drive the kind of development we want. Now, if Mr. Foley wants to participate in that later on, that's great. But I think you're kind of mixing apples and oranges. So the second piece, I think your question was how do we sort of avoid having the situation where you have a half-built building here and no development there? Folks, one, there's a reverter clause in the lease that says, just like with the ice arena. The ice arena was different. I'll tell you why it was different. The ice arena was different because we gave it away for $1. We had absolutely no leverage on that property. So we executed the reverter clause in the ice arena. We took back the land and we built the ice arena ourselves. And we took about $4 or $5 million out of our pocket that we probably didn't have at that time because we had to get it done. In this case, and that was done on an RDA, a redevelopment parcel, that was problematic to build on in defense of the decision, and that was good decisions. I'm not saying they were bad. In this case, we got 13 acres of prime land. So if Mr. Foley walks away from his $2.5 million, and we have a half-built facility there, we'll put it right back out to bid. People are going to trip over themselves to come back and develop it, and we'll collect another $2.5 million. Completely different aspect than because we have a reverter clause in the lease. He doesn't give it to us. He doesn't do what he says he's going to do. It comes back to the city. And whether or not we get his money back is a whole other situation. But a little bit different than what we had, say, in the downtown. So, I think that as the lease is executed, we have our check. I don't think people are going to put up that kind of money without having a plan to develop and have the financing to do it. Go ahead, Tricia.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think what's important in this discussion is that when the people of Danbury have questions like this, that they do get addressed as specifically as you did, because this way when somebody walks along and they say, well, why did you do that, or didn't you take this into consideration? Because a lot of people have that sense. And a lot of things do get a great deal of consideration before decisions are made. And I think it's important for the people of Danbury to hear that kind of dialogue. The other part of that, then back to you, Mr. Foley, is what, if you could do this, what would be your timetable from here to the end?
Good question, Mr. Foley. Timetable in terms of construction?
I would say it's from the time we get all the approvals to start construction, finish all the design, architectural, engineering, clear all your departments and get a building permit and be ready to go. We probably have, we may build it in phases, we may not, but we probably have 1.5 to 2 years of construction to get this thing up and running.
And
between site work and buildings, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, sir. Just give me the bottom, the one number from here to then.
I would say this is a guesstimate.
That's fine.
I would say it's about 1.5 to 2 years. Choose either number you like. From the time we put the shovel in the ground to the time we have substantial, ongoing, business operations. There are people seeing movies, having dinner, shopping, and etc.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Foley. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Nero. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Foley, I'm sure you ran the numbers on all this thing. How many people you think will be employed in that whole complex?
I hate to sound stupid, but I don't remember the answer. I haven't dealt with those numbers in months, so I apologize. It's in the hundreds.
In the hundreds?
Yes.
And what do you think the taxes are going to be on that? You must have some budget for tax. The buildings are up, we're all finished. What do you think you're going to be paying in taxes? Approximately. I'm not going to hold it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the reason it's not particularly important to a developer like me is what we do.
Triple that.
Yes. But you pass our taxes through to the tenant.
Right, so several $100,000 in taxes.
Right.
And several hundred people employed.
Yes.
Those are two big things, aren't they? Yeah. 13 lousy acres. I built houses on nice acres. Well, they are nice acres, but I mean, only 13 acres. We have single-family houses on bigger lots. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Chief Kern, okay, Mr. Cabo.
Thank you, Your Honor. Going back to part of what Mr. Pinter said, in our package and in the correspondence and in the 2 ad hoc committee reports, I think we've all been provided with pretty much the basic substantive part of the lease, is what we should be which we should be concerned about. I think the boilerplate, and I'll tell you for myself, I am not a lawyer. Bob Yemen, Les Pinter, lawyers, they do this. This is what they do every day, and I'm not going to sit here and second guess the boilerplate part of this lease. I see what's in the substantive agreement. I know the terms. I know the money amounts. I know the increases. I know the option to sell. I see all that. I know all that. That's what I need to know to be able to answer questions to my constituents when they ask me about this piece of property. As far as the boilerplate goes, that's what the lawyers are for. That's why they're here. That's why we hire them. That's why we pay them the dollars we pay them every year. And I'm comfortable with leaving that with them, knowing the basic fundamental parts of this lease that we have provided to us tonight. I would agree with Mr. Arconti when Mr. Foley's talking about 1.5 to 2 years of construction, which is going to mean 1.5 years to 2 years of construction jobs. And then there's going to be employment jobs after that, working in the theater, working in the retail. There's going to be taxes coming into the city based on buildings and appliances and structures and fixtures inside of these buildings. I got to tell you, folks, I'm going with this, and I encourage you to do it too. Thank you, Your Honor.
They are. And if people lose their jobs, it's going to be terrible.
Discussing earlier, I want to be able to say, when the decision is all done, that I actually saw all the terms of this lease. And while I refer to boilerplate all the time, oftentimes boilerplate is what lawyers pick at. And who used the term picayune at the last meeting was used a lot. These picayune terms can oftentimes be very material. But that being said, voting in favor of this will allow me, after looking at this lease, and I hope we can get it by July 1st, because Friday the 2nd is a holiday, is a day off here. But as long as we can get it prior to the July 6th meeting, it will allow us to review it in substance, ask questions, and move to reconsider if necessary, which is something that I will do if I think that there's something in here that needs to be debated again. And I thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Your Honor. Madam Clerk, is there a motion on the floor?
There is.
And it's the motion to... Would you mind reading the motion back, please, someone?
I have Les Pinter read it.
Thanks.
Mr. Perkins, the motion would be to declare as surplus 13 acres plus or minus on Old Ridgebury Road as described and depicted, and subject to posting and planning commission approval, and authorize the lease of the property to Realty Equities Group pursuant to a lease agreement with all material terms as described and as finally negotiated. That's the motion, Your Honor.
Thank you. But isn't that the original? I thought that someone made an additional motion here on the floor to consider looking at the lease before we all vote off on it tonight.
I think what happened is that through discussion, some clarity was brought to the process. Specifically, what that means is that you'll give the authority for us to go ahead and negotiate, execute the lease. The people who are, if you vote in the affirmative tonight, you can put the lease on the agenda for reconsideration in July if you're not happy with terms, or you can just ask questions to staff prior to that if it's just a question that you may have. Maybe it doesn't rise to the level of a full vote at the council, but it may just be an inquiry you want to make, and we'll be able to handle that. So I think we realistically can get the lease hammered out in the next 10 days and get it to you prior to July 1.
Okay, just one follow-up. Les, is there any particular reason why this particular proposal wasn't put out to bid?
Well, it wasn't put out to bid because the presentation proposal was made directly and then presented to the council. The council is authorized to waive bidding if you decide to do that. The ordinance provides that if you have surplus property, that the council may choose the means by which it disposes of that property. So if you, for example, rejected this tonight and said, go out to bid, you can do that if you want to. But you also have the right, if asked, as you are here, to follow this particular avenue.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Neal.
That was the question that I was going to ask.
Mr. Vitale.
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. This is just parliamentary. Les, through the chair to Les. Motion to reconsider. That's a 2/3, a simple majority, what?
Simple majority.
14 votes.
No, you have the ordinance, it says simple majority.
Not for a sale of property, release of property.
No.
Oh.
Motion to reconsider.
Yes, majority.
Simple majority.
Right.
Okay, and tonight we need 2/3 of the body or 2/3 of the panel?
2/3 of 14 votes.
14. 2/3 of the body.
Of the full body, correct.
Thank you.
Regardless of the addresses. Further discussion, Ms. Dean.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to be clear in my mind that a yes vote tonight still allows us to reconsider at the July 3rd meeting.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. Everybody get that? A yes vote tonight allows for reconsideration at July. We'll get a copy of the lease to you prior to July 3rd. When is that meeting? July 6th meeting. Any other discussions? Seeing none, let's try your minds. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, it'll be Mr. Lutella and Mr. Perkins in negative. Mr. Yaman, I need you to get with Mr. Presley and Mr. Foley. I need that lease.
We already have an appointment in the morning.
Okay, I want that lease out as soon as we can get it to the council members. Any motion to return? Can we go home there? Second, all in favor of return, signify by saying aye. Aye. Folks, quick reminder, the July meeting is July 6th at 7. Is that what the schedule says? Okay, so it's like a Wednesday or Thursday?
Thank you.